You can help support the channel by heading to our merchandise store and picking up some of our great aircraft designs created by our graphic designer. We have everything from fighters to transport aircraft, which you can choose to have printed on t-shirts, mugs, stickers and much more. Head to the description below and click the links and pick up your design today. Thank you and enjoy. So before we move on to your time on the F-5 and A-4, I'm guessing you're going to have some great stories there. So you went to Mountain Home with the F-3s. What were you doing over there?
We went over there just to train. We would, like once a year, the squadron would get a pretty decent debt to go somewhere. Like one year, like I said, we went to Spain. Another time we went to Hungary. We went to Lithuania. And we were just supporting like operations over there, basically kind of show of force type stuff in Lithuania. But we went over there to America. It was an opportunity to go train with the Americans. They had a little exercise going on where they invited the French and then us, and then they had F-15s at the time. And we were doing nothing but red air. And we mixed with the French a little bit for some of the red air stuff. But it was very scripted. They would tell you, the Air Force, like, okay, we want you to pretend you're a MiG-29, and the way you do that is you're not going to maneuver like a MiG-29, but you're going to use your radar like our intel tells us a slot back radar is going to do it, right? We're not going to detect you or spike you outside of this range. We're going to wait till you're here to do it.
Yeah.
So it's very similar because everything's tied into their shot ranges, and that's what they wanted to just to practice. So it was real scripted. We would go out there, they would tell you, hey, we want two groups, separated in range or azimuth. And there was always like somebody, their training officer, who would give us the scenario. And the pilots didn't know what the scenario was. We did. Does that make sense? So we go out there and pretend and do it. Mm-hmm. And then as a return, like once a week, they would give us red air and let us be the good guys, blue air for a flight. And I really didn't fly in a lot of those because those were such sought after training evolutions that usually the people from Trouble One Squadron that flew that would be the guys that needed the training. Does that make sense? Some of the young guys, hey, we need to get you some blue air with the U.S. Air Force here, because the Air Force can bring other assets and things like that. So they would some of the more junior guys would do those trips just so they could get the experience and signed off on certain things. Then it was very similar. So we would do that, and we would actually come out of those deaths. I felt like some of our best performances were there because everything worked good. We had they always had AWACS, or their ground controllers from the Air Force were really, really solid and good. So it was a very good training evolution for the Royal Air Force, because tell me a scenario where the RAF is going to go to war without the Americans there with them, right? Think about that. If Russia invaded Europe, something like that, Americans are going to be there too, right? And so it's good to train, and it's good to see the assets that America brings, because at the end of the day, your AWACS and stuff airborne are more than likely going to be American guys on those, because we got the most of them, right? It's just a numbers game. We're going to bring all that stuff to bear with us. And so those were really good training evolutions for the Royal Air Force. And they got to see, it was good to see the young guys in our RF squadron intermixing with the young guys in American F-15 squadrons too, because they're all the same, right? Except the Brits were, I thought, better pilots when I got over there initially, and also they were younger too. You guys, there were, as an American, before you can get in a frontline fighter squadron, you're probably 25 years old at a minimum, by the time you go to college and then go to flight school and go to the training squadron and make it to the frontline squadron, you're an older guy. With the British, there were a bunch of young chaps there. When I was shocked at how young they were when I got there. So a little different. Moving on to the F-5. The F-5 that's all we did was DACT, obviously, every day. And every day, day in and day out. And we were very scripted too. It depended who we were fighting. We did a lot of training against your OCU, I call it the RAG out of Miramar, the F-18 RAG. We would do a lot of training for them. Super scripted. A normal day would be if you're the flight lead from that evolution from the training squadron would call like 2 hours before the range time, and he would speak to you and he would tell you, hey, today this is what we're working on. And we would know their Silas events. We're doing, let's just say it's a BFM 106 or whatever, and we know what that syllabus calls for. And he would say, I want no more than two groups. I want range 20 on the first run. I want two groups azimuth, separation 15 on the second run. And so we would spend all our time. It was pretty boring for us in the F-5 because we would take off and we would know what we're going to do, and we'd set up, try to be as precise as we possibly could to give them the best training asset. We'd flow at them, two groups range, and our radars, we just had pulse radars. They kind of sucked, but we had really, really good GCI. And we would have pretty good essay on where they were and then where they're coming from and what they're doing. And so we would just fly along, just fat, dumb, and happy, just waiting to get killed. That was just the way it was. And we'd say, oh, here they come. And they don't see us, and there's a little bit, the F-5's hard to see, especially the way ours were painted. And we were always separated by blocks, but you were also kind of the safety manager too out there as the Red Air Squadron. We were in charge kind of with safety as well. So we'd make sure we adhere to our block usage, and then we would call them on it if they were out of their block, coming to emerge. If you don't see somebody at emerge, you got to stay in your block. If you have complete essay, like if you knew there were two airplanes out there and you saw both of them, then you can leave your block and come to the merge, but that's the only way you can do it. That's the discriminator. So we were kind of those safety manager type stuff. Then when we fight the fleet squadrons, it would be completely different because they would not tie our hands, right? And if they did tie our hands and told us to do something in range or azimuth, whatever, we would do it. And that kind of put them a little bit at advantage because they kind of knew what we were going to do and stuff. But every so often, they would tell us, hey, just do whatever you want, just do whatever you want. And wow, that was the ticket to just pillage at that point because we were very good flying F-5s on doing stuff like that. We're going to give you a scenario where I guarantee at least one of us is going to come to the merge. You're not going to kill all of us, pre-merge, because that's the goal in modern air combat. You don't want to see another airplane, right? You want the airplane, you want to identify him at range, you want to launch at range, and you want your missile to impact his before he has any chance of impacting you, right? You want to turn and go home, never see him. And that's how you preserve your assets. That's how you inflict the most damage and fear on the enemy, right? When they're just flying along and you look over and your wingman gets vaporized, right? So when you're actually coming to a merge, then some things have gone wrong along that process of that timeline before that merge happens to make that merge happen. So you don't want that to happen. But we would always get at least one person to the merge at that point, and usually probably 50% greater time they didn't even see him at that point. He comes to the merge and nobody even saw him, No. And then you can wreak havoc. And that was a lot, not because the F-5 is so great or anything. It's just you're flying against a cadre of pilots that do this day in and day out. We know the range space. We know kind of what you're going to do because we're at an advantage. We absolutely know what your tactics are because we all did those tactics. We're all F-18 pilots. But you don't know what we're going to do because you just basically untied our hands and said, do whatever you want. So we made up all kinds of crazy names for, different, based on the news of the day, there'd be different things. It's stuff I don't want to repeat here. I'm laughing to myself thinking of a couple of them, but
not suitable for YouTube probably. But one note here, Nugs. So if you did go to the merge and let's say you beat the Hornet, would they be grumpy if they went back and say, would they make excuses? How did that work?
No, it wouldn't be grumpy. The only person you talk to when because of our geolocation in Yuma flying, and we're flying the guys out of Miramar, we didn't often brief face to face, right? So we would go back and we would have we flew with tax pods, right? Are you familiar with that system? It's
it's like a range thing.
Yeah, yeah, it recreates the whole fight on a big screen, right?
Mm.
And so we would do a tax debrief. So we would go back and look at tax, and we would, that way we could write down our simulated shot ranges and different things like that to take back to their debrief. And we would usually generally only talk to their flight lead, right? The flight lead
Right.
would talk to us. And if it was a really bad flight, then it would be a quick brief. He'd get our shots and our range, and he'd want to rush off to go debrief his guys. But yeah, no, it was rare that they didn't get grumpy. They understood. It's just the way it was. I used to get beat up by the F-5s when I was a Hornet guy in Miramar. We'd go over there, and I knew all those guys, so I could tell by the guy I was flying against how it was going to go. Because there were some guys that were heavy hitters, and there were others that were more subdued and chilled out. Kind of guys. So it was more of who you were fighting and their attitude. You knew how the fight was going to go. So. But they're all professional, never fighting about it.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's move on to the A4 because that was with Draken, and that must have been fun because you sent me a few pictures before, and it looks like you were in kind of loose formation with some Super Hornets. So I'm guessing you fought those guys.
Yeah, we fought a little bit of Super Hornets. That was mainly that picture I sent you was doing close air support with them. Actually,
Mm.
I think not really fighting with them, but we did with the A4 fight F-22s, F-15s, both C and E models, and F-16s. So pretty much the whole, at that time, I never fought an F-35 in the A4, but certainly F-22s, F-15Es, and Cs and F-16s. And that was all out of Nellis Air Force Base in Vegas. When we first were standing up Draken, that's where we were flying out of, and we were supporting. I think it's the 422nd. It's basically operational test and evaluation squadron of the Air Force. So they have every type, model, series of fighter jet there, right? They have F-22s, F-15Es and Cs, and F-16s. And what they do is do operational tests on different systems and stuff like that,
Yeah.
right? So most of the time I had no idea what they were doing as far as what systems they were working on or what they were testing or anything because I didn't need to know what I was a target that they needed to get their check in the block with what they were testing. So everything was pretty scripted. We'd go out there, and when we did stuff with them, and they would script it out for us because they were looking for different detection ranges and stuff like that. So
Mm.
nothing real remarkable about that. But every now and then we would join up with, they had an adversary F-16 squadron there
Yeah.
at Nellis, and we worked out of their spaces actually. And we would do stuff combined with them from time to time, which was more exciting because we would go up against fleet F-15, F-22 squadrons, other F-16s, and we would join in with the Air Force adversaries to be as a force multiplier. They would usually do OCA sweep in front of us, and we would be like bombers in the back with the capability to shoot because we had air-to-air radar in the A4 as well. And that was pretty fun. We go out there. Let me just say, hands down, the U.S. Air Force does a really good job with OCA and DCA, as you'd expect they do. They're very, very standardized, and they bring a lot of assets to bear, right? That I wasn't used to seeing necessarily in the Marine Corps. Anytime they go to the fight, they have a lot of little extra things that are out there helping them out, which is pretty impressive in the end of the day. So, but yeah, that's mainly the OCA. I'm sorry, DACT that I would do in the A4 was that. Towards the end there, we moved our A4s out to Kinston, North Carolina, and we would fight at that point the F-15E, RTU, OCU, RAG, whatever you want to call it. So it was all training environment, kind of like what I did in the F-5 sometimes, fighting the training school for the F-18s. We would go out over the coast there in North Carolina and fight the F-15Es, the Strike Eagles. And once again, that was very canned as well. Some of the more fun stuff we did with them, though, would be they would do defensive engagement where they would fly as a two ship, about 2 miles spread, and then we would camp out about 2 miles behind them, right, and follow them around. And they were waiting for their student. One plane would be the instructor pilot with the student navigator,
Mhm.
and then a student pilot with the instructor navigator in the other airplane or Wizzo. And we would just camp out behind them, and then they would wait. The instructors knew we were there, but they would wait till the student would get an eye on us, in a turn, see A4 behind them, follow them, and then they would engage us. So that was fun because then you get to do a 2v1 the hard way against two F-15Es in the A4, and that was pretty fun. You could usually do some good work on them if they didn't really know what they were doing yet. Because F-15 is a lot of thrust, big airplane, but it's not as maneuverable, only because they carry a lot of pods on it and stuff like that. So that was always
Yeah,
good fun.
yeah, I can imagine the A4 kind of has a big chance there because they're always tanked up and got the pods on. So yeah, I think the A4 could give it a run
Yeah.
for its money for sure.
Yeah, and we were hard to keep sight. If they're not
Yeah,
used to looking at a smaller airplane, that's the big thing. Lose sight, lose the fight. It's if you're in a visual engagement and you lose sight of that other airplane, it's a really bad feeling. It's not
Mhm.
it's not a good feeling. So.
Yeah. And so like back in the day when you were flying basically the F3 and the Hornet, did you still feel you might merge with another aircraft? Was that a
What
possibility
do,
compared to now? Like I'm guessing people don't even think that's even going to happen.
You all, let me just say this: you wanted to merge because that's where the fun happened, right?
Of course, yeah.
In training, especially, you're always looking to merge. Being shooting beyond visual range, BVR. It's the bread and butter. I go to war with the Chinese. I would prefer to shoot them BVR than come to the merge anytime, right? That's just
Of
the way
course.
it is. But you want to come to the merge, especially when you're training. So yeah, you would generally every unless it was a large force exercise, meaning like a big like a red flag event, something like that. Merges don't happen a lot in those because when they do, things have gone really, really bad. There's a lot of assets looking out for it. It doesn't really happen. Day to day training, like on the RAF, we go out and do a 4v2. Sometimes we'd fight the Hawks. They would come down. I can't remember
Yeah.
what squadron that was, but they would
100
come
squadron
up
maybe,
and
yeah.
yeah, yeah, it was 100 squadron. They would come up and we'd do something with the Hawks and stuff. So we'd always come to the merge with them. Um, but yeah, there was always somebody who was going to get to the merge because as Red Air, if you're smart and your hands aren't completely tied, you're going to do something to get somebody to the merge. And it's really not that hard to do if you really wanted to do it.
Mhm. Absolutely, and some great stories there. But to wrap up this interview, I've got a good question from one of our viewers. If you're happy to answer this, Nugs.
Sure.
So, if you were going into the merge or a BFM fight against an F-16, which would you take? The F-18, Tornado F-3, F-5, or A-4?
And I was going to the merge against an F-16. I would have to take the F-18 only because of the ability to get slow, with the airplane. Because if you get in a good BFM engagement with somebody, energy is always going to get bled off the airplane, right? You're never fighting going uphill.
Yeah.
You're going to fight going downhill. Those are knowns, and you're each going to be pulling, and you're going to be bleeding energy off the airplane. So if you want to survive and probably have the best chance, you want an airplane that has a good thrust to weight and is able to fly at a high angle of attack. And you always want some off-bore sight missiles. Well, let's take this. If I were fighting an F-16 and I had old AIM-9 like Mike's, and or I could take a Tornado and I could have the ASRAM, then I might choose the Tornado F3.
Mm,
Because my off bore sight capability with that missile, I can shoot him a lot easier. So
yeah.
it's but just pure one on one. Let's say we're heaters and guns,
Hornet.
then it would have to be the Hornet. It would have to be.
Absolutely.
So.
Well, I mean, what a great chat, and I can't wait for people to watch this. But yeah, Nugs, what are you up to at the moment? You still flying, or what's your plans at the moment?
Yeah, I've changed up a little bit. I went from being in the right seat of the 777 doing all international. Now I'm a captain flying the 737.
Congrats.
out of Houston. Well, I've been doing it for a while now. So I commute down to Houston from here in Arkansas. And Leah, the wife, is still on the 777. She can't get rid of she likes the big airplanes and flying to international spots. Likes to go shopping everywhere, and she's still going out of DC on the triple. She really enjoys that. We're both doing a lot of union work as well. I'm on our pilot union here at United Airlines on our communications committee. So I do a lot of editing and putting out different stuff. And then my wife she's on one of the committees that inspects the hotels the pilots stay at, things like that. So we try to stay busy and help our fellow pilots out as much as we can. I want to throw in a plug from my son is down in Corpus Christi right now, and he's flying the T6, working hard, hoping to, do well. He's doing well so far. So we're just proud of him and happy he's down there and chose to fly as well. I tell him all the time, I trade places with you in a heartbeat, be able to go back and do that again. So.
And does he ever come for you for advice or anything like that? Because he's in the perfect position to do that.
Back in the days when he was getting his private pilot license, he would, but not really, not really. He's going at it on his own.
Making his own path.
If there's his own path. If there's ever something he knows he can ask me and stuff, and I'm sure as he advances on, that there'll be a lot of questions. But right now, he's just head down in the books, just studying and doing the best he can, which is doing good.
That's awesome. And me and all the viewers wish him well. But Nugs, thank you very much for coming on the show again. As you know, it's always a pleasure. And I'm sure we'll catch up soon.
Yeah, hopefully. And I always enjoy talking to you and watching your pieces. Like I said, I learn something new every time I watch one. I appreciate that.
Good stuff. Cheers, Nugs.
See you, buddy.